Yeah, they got you. They got you. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Okay, let me see. I think we are on.
Oh, it is www.
Wait a little bit till like more people can come in and join.
Que tiemble el Estado, los cielos, las calles, que tiemblen los jueces y los judiciales. Hoy a las mujeres nos quitan la calma, nos sembraron miedo, nos crecieron alas. A cada minuto de cada semana nos roban amigas, nos matan hermanas, destrozan sus cuerpos, los desaparecen. No olvides su nombre, por favor, señor presidente. Por todas las tumbas marchando en Reforma, por todas las morras peleando en Sonora, por las comandantas luchando.
Hello, hello.
Por todas las madres buscando en Tijuana, cantamos sin miedo, pedimos justicia, gritamos por cada desaparecida. Que resuene fuerte, nos
We're about to start. This is another episode of Friends to the Left with Fernie Mac and Rebeltosa. So we're going to start in about a minute. If you see this right now, if you're my mom, please share. Mamá, si ves esto. Estamos aquí ahorita empezando el programa de Amigues a la Izquierda con Fernie Mac y Rebeltosa. Entonces, por favor, me comparte con toda la raza. All right. Hey, y'all. Hey, Fern, what you doing?
You know, I'm just telling friends about the show that we're about to begin, sending out a last few texts saying, listen in live to WDYO. This is Radio Dignidad. Cecile already said it, and I want to say it too. We are live here in Nashville. It is a nice, bright, and sunny day. A little cool out. There's a couple of puppies outside. How you feeling about it all?
Great. I mean, one of the puppies just like tried to nibble at my knee.
The blonde one?
The blonde one, yeah, you know.
Yeah, we know that one. What a sweet puppy dog. Anyways, yeah. What has happened in your week? You don't have to do like a full thing if you don't want to, but like, what is something cool? What is something fun? Or what is the thing that stuck out to you in the last week?
I don't know. There's a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
We have been working with some awesome partners that are envisioning a different kind of affordable housing because, you know, like the city just invests all this money on, you know, the same affordable housing developers where like the workers that build the buildings are like getting wage theft and abuse, but then also like once the tenants come in, you know, usually they're the kinds of developers that end up taking Section 8 vouchers, right? So they take all the city money and then they end up kicking out people who are in Section 8. So like it defeats the purpose completely. So we've been working, you know, pushing.
I've heard a lot about that. Yeah.
Trying to push the city, to invest in something different. Like we also have some events coming up. We have a training happening this Saturday. If you want to rights as a protester, you can come on Saturday at 2 p.m. Maybe somebody can put the link in the comment section, or if not, I can do it after this video.
Where's Alfredo?
If Fred is listening, drop the link. It is by the staff, and we're gonna have Will York, which is an awesome lawyer from Austin Law.
Shout out.
We've gotten Pascal on us before, campaign, and he just really knows, how to protect yourself.
Yeah.
How, what are your rights?
Real quick, like, what do you think that this training will prepare protesters with? Like, what kind of information do you think that they're going to get from this training?
Well, I am not the one putting this training together, which is great. It's amazing. But, just some of the basics, how, what are your rights in public property versus private property? What do you do if the property owner calls the cops on you? What do you do in case of an escalation? So you're going to know a little bit about that. It's going to be the beginning. So obviously, we never just do one-offs. Workers Unity, we're trying to, this training is intentional. We're trying to develop, our folks in a group of people that can really respond to emergencies, to illegal evictions, to workplace actions. So don't miss it.
I sat in on this one meeting. It wasn't a meeting, it was a panel. I was not a part of the panel, I was one of the people out in the audience, but they had 5 different members, somebody from a church. They had a professor who was involved with civil rights work. Shout out to Dr. Sekou Franklin. Who else? They had somebody from the Black Panther. They had somebody who was does a lot of arms training. And kind of they were just breaking down how, maybe it looks intimidating to see people be, to show up just ready. And I'm not saying show up with arms or whatever, what have you. But I'm talking about just the preparedness, knowing about the fragility of the situation you're going into. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being prepared as far as knowing your rights, knowing how to protect yourself. Because there are people who, there are opportunities where people will take advantage of you. I know you've seen it. We've had some moments where, like you were just mentioning, cops being called on folks who were literally just standing up for themselves, and the cops are
middle finger to
the law. Middle finger to the law. But this whole thing of being prepared is not just to say hey, I'm here, I'm ready to fight. It is not a combative thing. It is literally just to make sure that you yourself are taken care of, the folks around you are taken care of. It is really a safety training, if anything.
And we need to be prepared, right? So because in the heat of the moment, with the adrenaline that is happening, when you don't know what to do, you can actually make things worse. So we want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that is aligned with our strategy, with our values, and so it is very important for our folks to be prepared so they know what to do. We don't want to gatekeep that kind of information. So definitely, if you have some time on Saturday, and we also just have so much going on that just stay updated. Look at our social media because there's gonna be a lot of different activity that is gonna be happening. I'm really excited.
I think I'm gonna show up just because I personally I want to learn more about de-escalation. I think it was you. Maybe when the cops got called and brought over to Chattable or Shohan, after they fired several people who had families, kids, all these things, no notice, fired them all. We're outside of one of their restaurants, the owner's restaurants, and the cops are called, and it's why are y'all even here? We're literally just letting people know that, I'm not going to give an exact number, but at minimum 10 people, many of them with families, lost their income and they were frustrated. They weren't doing anything crazy. Nobody was really doing anything crazy. Other than just handing out flyers saying, hey, know what kind of business you're supporting. And it's a moment like that, the wrong dynamic.
Absolutely. I mean, you need to think what is the role of the police, right? They're not there to protect us, they're there to protect property. And this is going to happen. If you have an action, always have a police liaison. And here is Bobby is asking a question. Will the training include rights tenants have when there are fires in apartments, like what happened at Foxcroft Apartments? And if you don't know what happened there, so close to Paragon Mills in South Nashville, a lot of apartments were burned down. I mean, Fern was there.
Yeah.
I was there. Do you want to share a little bit about what experience was like?
That was like traumatic, a struggle for many people. I remember just like seeing the fire in the neighborhood and just being like, that's crazy. But then I think it was you who got a call from someone who said they needed a translator or something, and then we showed up. And wait, was that Bobby who called you?
Yes, it was Bobby.
Right,
So
right.
Bobby is a teacher at Paragon Mills, and she says she had students whose families lost everything. And especially right now in Nashville, where and there's still families displaced. So Bobby, if you know how we can support the families at Foxcroft Apartments, please put it in the comments. If there's a link, if there is a GoFundMe going on for the families. It's really unfortunate. A lot of these apartment complexes where working class families are living, I have been noticing that there have been a lot of fires this summer.
Yeah.
A lot of neglect in terms of maintenance.
At least 3 big apartment complexes, like hundreds of people. Anyway, sorry.
No. I mean, and what is going to happen to the folks, right? Because the apartment complex is not going to be, I imagine they're not becoming responsible for ensuring that folks have a place to go or a place to live, even if there was any kind of neglect going on.
Yeah.
So this training is not going to be specifically for that, but we can definitely create a training on just like tenant protections and tenant rights. This is specifically for what to do as a protester when you are manifesting. Either you are a worker standing up, a tenant standing up, or you are standing up in support or in solidarity.
Yeah.
So what are your rights during a protest? And how to hold, how to protest in a way that is strategic and planned. So, you remember what we talked about during the last episode?
What did we talk about? We've been talking about individualism a lot. We've been talking about collectivism a lot. We've been breaking down the issues of collectivism, or not collectivism, the issues of individualism, which might look like, not showing up for your neighbor, not really considering that, your individual power has a lot of power to hurt people, but at the same time, it also has a lot of power to help build people up.
It's like how, we can often be stuck in a self-help loop, right? Everybody, when people are upset, when people are depressed, when people are, we throw the idea of therapy around for absolutely everything, which honestly, I am a huge advocate of therapy, but also how therapy is not just the end-all be-all for, a community or an individual well-being, because at the end, we're basically animals that have language, and as animals, we're part of the ecosystem, which means that we are interdependent, or like our most fulfilled self is done when we're practicing interdependence, because we definitely need each other to survive.
Slow down. One more time for everybody, not the last time, but one more time again, what is interdependence?
So interdependence is the is the knowledge that we are depending on each other.
Yeah.
It is completely different than codependence, right? So in this, and I think that you came up with some really interesting analogies for it, where codependence is an uneven relationship where one entity has way too much power on the other person.
Yeah.
They might be giving something to the other person, but it's on their terms.
Yeah.
And it is creating a pattern that is unhealthy.
A familiar relationship, often like codependent, but it makes more sense because somebody's like raising someone to maturity or like helping push their consciousness. But like, I don't remember the analogy I used last week, but let's just think a little bit of like taking out a loan, for example. You need some money, you take out a loan, but that loan, it increases in the, interest. So that interest is kind of used as like a method of we're laying down the hammer, and if you don't show up, we're going to lay down the hammer some more. It's not healthy. It's not really helpful because you really just need to give back that.
I think you use staffing agencies.
Staffing agencies is another one. I mean, it all works around money. Staffing agencies, they give you the bare minimum, so you have to show up the next day. You have to come back and get this $80, $90 a day, just so that way you know, you can leave that job and not have enough to survive, you know, past that again. And it's just a cyclical thing.
A lot of low-wage jobs,
Yeah.
I feel like, could be used as an analogy for like a codependent relationship where they're not giving you enough to survive. They're stealing your labor. They are
controlling something about you.
Absolutely. It's about control. It's about domination. And ultimately,
maintaining that control.
Absolutely. And I feel like ultimately a state of codependence is encouraged or fostered by the extreme individualism, like the individualist culture that we have.
Yeah.
So when you think about individualism, is the belief that we should be able to be independent, that we should be able to have it all together, that we should be able to provide everything we need for ourselves and for our small nuclear families, right?
Yeah.
That we don't necessarily need the collectivism, the collective to accomplish the things that we definitely need. And that only serves a small group of people that control the economy of our world, right? The imperial interests, right? So
I feel that.
Absolutely. They want us alone. You know, the boss wants you alone. They want you to compete with each other. They want to break down the unity. When, you know, when we really think about the other side of the coin, collectivism, interdependence, that's also what's going to help us feel more fulfilled, right? We can go into this circle of self-help and self-loop, thinking that like we should have it all together. We should improve ourselves. But we look around you. Like, it doesn't matter how much you can work on yourself. Like, ultimately, you also, like, we are living in a, you know, in a fallen economy, in a failed state.
Can we
built on genocide? Let me go on.
Cecilia's got time for all of this. So do I. But let's segue, because you hit it like at a really important point, and one of the things we're going to talk about today. We've got a lot to share with you today. But one of the things that we're going to start off with is talking about that self-help loop. And like self-help is great. You know, if somebody picks you up off the ground, or if you are able to pick yourself up off the ground, that is wonderful and that is beautiful. But let's just say, hypothetically, story time. You're a 6-year-old kid and your shoes are tied together, and you trip and you fall, and then you get back up, and then you trip and you fall again, and then, you know, this cycle continues. At some point, you're going to have to understand, okay, I need to, maybe it's silly, maybe it was a joke for a moment, but you need to untie these shoes, relace them, resort them out. So, like, let's make this a little bit more relatable here. When we're talking about that self-help loop of picking yourself up again and again and again, I don't know. What stopped you from acknowledging the way your shoes were tied from the jump? So if you are reading all of these books, if you like, I'm just gonna throw some names out there, and these are people I admire. They are big self-help folks, but like these are people I admire. Adrienne Marie Brown. Who's that one? What's that one lady? Oh gosh, you know. What's her name? I can't remember her name. My mom quotes her all the time. She'll probably text me the name here in a sec. But anyways, we're gonna skip the names.
Oprah?
No, we can say Oprah. Yeah, we can say Oprah. We could say Steve Harvey. We could say we could say a lot of people. The point that I'm trying to make now is, at some point, you need to be able to trust yourself, or you need to find the actions that actually keep you stable. And maybe that looks a lot like trust with your inner self. So when you find yourself in like these community efforts and you're like, you know, I really want to show up, but today I'm a little tired. And then you keep on going down that route of, okay, I'm just going to keep on having my break. And my break's going to keep going because, you know, I don't have time for this. Maybe you never challenged yourself to find out that you did. And that sucks to have to like pull yourself out of that struggle. But I think it's so worthwhile to find yourself in a place where like you've got some footing and you've actually got time to contribute. So
let me know when I put this.
Throw it up. So we've got this thing on this we've got this picture for those of you who are watching online, and we're talking about these different forms of presence. So on one end, you see this line going up and down. You've got the outward, meaning what you put out into the world. Let this be things you say, the art you create. That can be you showing up and picking up a table, picking up a chair, what have you, bringing food to somebody. And then you have the inward, which is the more self-help bits, where you're like reading and you're consoling yourself and you're thinking about things. I think that's beautiful. I think that's great. But we got to have a balance. We got to realize if I'm taking all this time to rest, is that because I'm building up the capacity to help, or am I just going to stay, complacent?
Reading.
Yeah.
And
nothing wrong with reading. There's nothing wrong with it. What do you think about that?
I know. I mean, I think the same. I do have, a lot of folks that, the whole self-care movement, I think is beautiful. I think many organizers definitely need it. I know I need it too.
I need it too.
Yeah.
But you also need to get back outside at some point.
Yeah.
Because I think the thing that we're trying to combat here is when your ideology, your ideas, or like all the fancy speech, if I do all this stuff on the radio, if you and I just sit here and talk on the radio for weeks on end, and we say all these really nice things, but y'all never see us out there with the people, that is the disconnect, and that is what we don't want to see. And this is the thing that we're like speaking to right now, that we want to encourage folks not to get caught up in. This radio does not need to be the end-all be-all. This radio needs to set a standard for what we go do when we walk outside of here. So we've got the outward, which is stepping out, going to talk to people, finding out what their needs are, and learning and strategizing how to fight for and with them. But then we have the inward, which might be the time before we get on the radio, where we process what we want to talk about. Now, you got this? Because I'm about to go on.
No. I was just like, there's so many influencers that are, sharing advice on like what to do for movements that never get out of, they have podcasts, they have graphics, but they never really go on the ground. So that really resonated
How
with
do we get you up and out on the ground and in the streets?
Bobby, too much looking at your ombligo.
Yeah.
Ombligo means belly button.
Belly button? I ain't seen that belly button in a minute. Anyways, on the other end, so we've got the outward and the inward, and then we also have passive and active. So you got passive, which is stationary. It is observing. It might have no judgment. If you look at the image that we have on the screen, it talks about observation without judgment. To be passive is to not have any effect, to not cause any ripple. It has no weight. It has no say. It is just there. Or sometimes that is what you need. Sometimes we do need to rest. But let that rest be a build-up for something else. And then on the other end of passive, we have active, which can look like showing up to the march. It can look like showing up to your union meeting, folks. We need more of that. It can look like asking a relative, like, yo, how's your work situation? Your coworker, yo, are you being paid on time? I didn't get my paycheck last week. Are you in the same boat, or am I going through this alone? So it is having these conversations and like, not just these conversations, but these actions that propel what we're moving towards. So you've got these things, they're on an axis. You can be very passive and very inward, which is not doing much of anything. But then you could be very outward focused, and you can be very active. That is very much the collective end that we're looking at. Folks who are active and showing up, and then they're outward, looking out towards others. Their stuff has weight, their stuff has impact, they're contributing to the conversation. And then, like I said, the passive inward side, not doing much of anything. So you can't see it on the screen here, but the goal of this conversation is to really kind of push like a balance. Because of course in the last 2 weeks, you all have heard us not necessarily bash self-help, not bash therapy, but we are bashing like just being, sedimentary?
Staying in one corner.
Yeah, we are kind of talking to staying in that one corner and not believing that you have anything to contribute, or being stuck in that corner and just saying, this is my safe place. Because that safe place in that corner
It's not gonna get you healthcare.
It's not gonna get you healthcare. It's not gonna affect your wages. It's going to let your boss know that you're okay with your wages, and you can just complain about it on your own in your own time. What are you thinking?
I mean, I just feel like, yeah, that's it. I mean, I think that one thing that we were talking about that I feel like it's important to also be passive and inward every now and then, right? And it's important also for collectivism, because sometimes we need to listen, right? And we're not listening. So it is important to understand when it is needed to be listening, when action is required of you.
Absolutely.
When you need to take a nap, absolutely. But at the end of the day, one thing that we all need to be, I think that we've been stressing over, in that, if this is something that you want to take home, is that yes, you can improve yourself, and that's great, but that's not gonna make you feel fulfilled, because you are a human being, you are part of the ecosystem, and you need others to survive. That's one. And number two, the things that you really want that right now probably are in your mind that you think are not possible, like a different world for your country to be free from imperial. I want the U.S. military outside of my country.
Real quick, because I feel you, but I don't know if everybody else is feeling what you're saying.
I want the military out of my country.
I want the military out of my country too. Let's dial this back a little. Let's take away the terms like military, all the trigger words for these people who are like very new to this. We are friends to the left, by the way. We're not gonna hold back, but we'll make it palatable if you're not fully aligned with us right now. Let me break it to this point. If you see people on the street struggling and you think to yourself, I hate that, but you also think to yourself, but my life is fine, do you actually care? Or do you just for a moment have a little bit of sympathy? What we're trying to push right now is you've got space to care for yourself, but you've got space to care for them as well. So what does that look like? I wrote a few questions about this here. One of them is, how are we showing up? Is showing up just for yourself, or showing up, extending that I don't even know what it's called, extending that stability. How do you create more stability for others? How do you not, drive down the street and just like see everything and like go numb to it all? Because that's not going to help us. Another thought, individualism and approaching growth with the things that we've mentioned as far as passive and active, outward and inward. Like, we have to be able to expand around those. We need a little bit of both, like what Cecilia was just saying. We need a little bit of all of it, like Cecilia was saying. We need time to rest, but we also need to rest to be able to get out and like further impact. And the one question I'm going to leave you with, because we're not going to go in on this forever unless Cecilia's got some questions. I do want to hear what
I want to think about it.
But what needs to shift? What needs to shift? If you listen to this and you thought of yourself as, okay, I'm very passive and inward, or I'm kind of active. I show up for people and I talk a lot. Do you need to dial back and listen to some folks more to better know how to fight for them? Or do you need to speak up about what you need or what you are seeing other folks need and you need to be more active? What needs to shift? What are the things that you're noticing? And I would love to hear from some folks. Feel free. We got
some questions. What's the value of the individual in Marxism? So
I'm not going to answer this question. You're going to answer this question. If you want to.
I mean, I think that we are like the collectivism doesn't exclude autonomy. It doesn't exclude the will of the individual. Mm-hmm. But I think that is very important. I'm just gonna tie this up perfectly with what I was already gonna say, which is, I think we need to create a share. Like, I think it's so important to understand like where the source of our power and our oppression is. Mm-hmm. That of the oppressor, and also what is the vision that we have, right? We don't really want to focus on the oppressor where we're fighting. We want to focus on the better world, right? That we know is possible, the things that we want. Like, I keep going back to this because I think that's ultimately, that's what matters the most, right? When it comes to like Marx, he noticed that capitalism requires exploitation. It requires stealing the labor of the proletariat. And, the proletariat needs to be the main force, and they need it needs to be the ones that like their own change, right? Not spectators of their liberation. And so we need to think about what is the vision that we truly want. Like those things that maybe, like, and I think that many folks that might be stuck in this self-help book might have this part in their subconscious. They want these things. I believe they want these things. But they might not think this is a possibility, right? Trauma has blocked our capacity to envision better things and envision a better world, right? For me, I mean, I am going to be very personal, right? Like I come from a third world country. Third world is actually not derogatory. Please ask me about the Third World Project or look up the Third World Project. Look it up on Google. But, you know, we have been an experimental playground for Western countries for extracting our resources, for enforcing violent, foreign policy that destabilizes our countries. You know, using excuses like the drug war, which, you know, this country is very much financially linked to the drug war. But some of the things that we want, like my people want water, access to water. My people want like the military outside of their streets. They want to be safe. They want to make sure that they can, you know, provide for their families. And it's like all of these different things are not possible unless we act together.
Can I ask a question? So, I don't know, maybe, not that we don't go through this, you know, you mentioned like wanting water. You know, I feel like things like that, not having water, not, or dealing with, well, let's just use the water as an example. Certain things can trigger people to rally. You talked about a hot shop at one point. You know, these things that like a group or society will go through that causes or triggers them to like show up and organize. The things that they immediately say like, yo, nobody in this town has water right now. So if I don't have water, I know you don't have water because we share this space. So these things are the things that rally us up. I feel like those sorts of things are like, they would force somebody to go from passive to active really quick, just out of the awareness of, okay, hundreds, thousands of people are hurting right now, myself included, what can we do? But not everybody's going through that. A lot of people are passively watching that happen across state lines. We're seeing that happen in Mississippi. You were telling me months ago about your mother having to ration water. Like, these, you know, and we are able to passively look and then fill our cups. And we don't have to move across the line. We don't have to move from passive to active. But would you say, I don't know, if you could just speak to getting from here to there, from passive to active, without having to go through the tragedy?
Through the tragedy?
Without having to go through a tragedy. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people off there.
The thing is, like, we're all mad. Everybody's mad. I know that there are some folks that are more directly impacted, and even my experience, right? Like, I definitely, and thank you, Bobby, for saying that. Fleeing water crisis is still relevant, right? Like, there's so many people right now in the United States that have, lack of access to these kind of very basic human dignity things, like Jackson, Mississippi, Flint. These are very radicalizing moments, and you have people who are more directly affected. But one thing that I feel it's safe to assume in this empire in that we live in,
all it is to say,
under this empire, is that we're all mad. Like, we're mad. Everybody is pissed. Nobody's getting what they need. I mean, you know, just last week, like, we were talking to Vanderbilt graduate workers, right? Which, you know, so many people look up to them and be like, oh, yeah, they got what they really need. You know, they are in this elite institution getting a fancy degree. But, like, you know, you don't think about the fact that they are, you know, the graduate students are basically the engine for Vanderbilt's and any universities, like, academic work. And, you know, most of them earn poverty wages, like $28,000.
All the research.
All of it, right? So everybody's pissed, even though we're all at different levels. So a lot of organizing is finding out, like, why are people pissed about, and how can we use this anger in a way that is actually productive and get us those things that we want. Get us water in Flint, get us water in Jackson, Mississippi, get us water across Latin America, get get militaries outside of our countries, right? Like that's really what we want, because the self-care loop, like, yeah, it can get me to be better at yoga. I can become really good at mindfulness meditation, but I honestly, more than anything, like, I want my mom to have water, I want to be safe, I want those things, right? And so we need to think about how to focus and how to put our actions. And sometimes what's gonna get us the water is to listen and be passive and actually shut up for once, because I think then there's also that whole, like, we can be very active, we can be very outward, we can be very much doing things in the community, but our priorities might not be aligned with what we want or the vision if we're not engaging in collective decision making and organizing and talking to a lot of different people. Because another part in which I feel, and maybe this is the shift, that individualism might show up is when I'm, looking at this systemic issue. And I think that when the graphic that you put is very common in folks that might not be as active yet in organizing spaces, because they might be like, oh, well, I really want to go to this meeting, but I'm just going to read this self-care book or whatever. When you have folks that are really active and were in these spaces, other ways in which in which individualism can still show up is just the way that we interpret systemic oppression. And we project it onto ourselves without really listening to all these other folks that are out there, right? So I cannot count how many times I've been asked to be on a panel to talk about the immigrant experience. And I'm just like, I'm just one person, right? And the I could never, one single individual is never gonna represent a community. Right? So there's so many problems with that. So, for example, I have experienced racism. Have I experienced discrimination? Absolutely. I have experienced it in academia, and I have experienced it in different classrooms and settings, like people not believing that you're good enough. College professors telling me, basically completely like discounting a whole test and a whole assignment just based on the fact that I had gotten the highest grade. And they were like, well, if Cecilia got the highest grade, there must be something wrong with the test. And I would be like the only person of color in the room. I would be the only person of color there. But at the same time, there is something lazy with basing like generalizations about systemic issues on a single person.
Slow down. So there's something lazy about basing systemic issues off of an individual. Basically.
Of an individual's opinion.
An individual's opinion or experience. It is lazy. Huh. All right. Keep it going. No, I just wanted people to sit and think about that. Because that plays into what you're about to talk about, but that also plays into kind of what I was mentioning with this circle, as far as leaning too much onto that self-help loop. It is very nice. Again, I'm going to say this one more time, and then I'm going to stop feeling bad about saying this, but leaning too much on the self-help loop, it is very much an internalized, like, where is my experience? What is my mode? What is my mood? My mood determines me, my determines how I can show up in the world. But we need to be able to shift that thinking. Now, with what you just said, you took it from like a group kind of looking at an individual, and instead of doing the extra work of seeking more people, we don't stop at one worker who's dealt with wage theft. We go and find all the workers who have dealt with wage theft. That one worker does not represent all, but they are part of the all. So with you were mentioning, I guess your professor questioned the test as a whole because of just you?
Yeah. Well, it was a test done by another professor. And it was like a protein analysis software. That professor was already making my life a little miserable. And then he said, like, well, you really need to learn how to use this protein analysis software. and it's very important for your career. And the creator of the software is actually going to do a test to test you on how good you know this.
Okay.
And so I got the highest grade.
Hell yeah.
And then the teacher decided to not count that in the final grade because they thought that it must have been done wrong because I got the highest grade.
Wow.
And it's usually like the white men who had the highest grade with the test that the professor would do.
So they put all the emphasis on like what these white men could and couldn't do over like what you
yeah,
yeah,
that's messed.
Yeah, it's super messed up. Well, keep going.
No,
you were kind of unfolding more about that,
and I could make a lot of generalizations about that.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is also another perspective of the fact that I was able to make it into a university in the United States, in a career, in a major that is often inaccessible for the majority of people who look like me. Mm-hmm. So it is one perspective for sure, and definitely there is discrimination going on. Yeah. But it's just not the end all be all, of like it doesn't. Sometimes like when we are looking at that, when we are thinking like I am a person of color in this space, there's also some privilege to that. Yeah. Because
what does that power look like? I say power, and it's not a real power. It is like some, I don't know, let's just say like some like old white dudes like kind of bestowing upon you, all right, my token child, here, have your chance, and you will determine the way I view many, many, many others. Like, what did that look like in that experience for you?
Honestly,
tie it into where you're going, but I'm just kind of...
It was honestly a really difficult experience. It was very difficult.
Did you feel the responsibility to balance that, or were you just kind of like, I'm here and I'm glad I'm here and I'm going to make the most of this?
No, I was really messed by the situation. Mm-hmm. I mean, and like what the point I'm really trying to make is like...
Sorry if I took you in.
It definitely made me question a lot of things about my identity, right? Like it's one of those times that I've been aware of my identity for a while, since I was a kid, because, Mexico too is, pretty racist, even though they say they're not, with, folks who are from like indigenous or like Afro descent. Mm-hmm. But it definitely like was one of those times where like, America, like the way that the United States like is a specific flavor of racism, I became very aware and started to like think more about my identity. Mm-hmm. And I think like the comment that Bob is making here, right? Like we all start like orugas, which is like caterpillars in our political education evolution. I think that identity was so important to me at the beginning to start forming a political analysis. Yes. Mm-hmm. So it was an important tool that many of us have. And I think many of us who end up in organizing spaces, like we also have moments like that when we're looking at our identity and we are creating these conclusions. And I think one step forward that I wish I knew before is that like, okay, this is one, but that is not going to be like whatever conclusion I make from this. Mm-hmm. I need to talk to a lot more people who look like me. Yeah. Because like the priorities cannot be determined by me. The priorities of our movement. And so almost every movement...
You didn't accept that responsibility they were trying to put on you then. I'm sorry, maybe I am projecting, but just from the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, I represent my people, like, right? Like, I could have done that. I could have done that. I could have, like, become, like, that would have made me absolutely miserable, one. And I think that at that moment, like, in 2014, 2013, around that moment, like, I think it was a lot more common to say, like, I cannot speak for my people. Mm-hmm. And we actually used to say that a lot. Yeah. But I don't see that, like, we don't say that as much anymore. We are actually, a lot of us are speaking, like, I see a lot of organizers nowadays speaking for their people, right? Yeah. And I see...
speaking to the systematic things more than just the individual feelings.
In some ways, or like, this is what my people need. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, like, back in the day, like, it was a lot more common to say, I cannot speak for my people. Yeah. Which I feel like we should bring it back. Because... we sometimes can get lost in that. We can have communities of activists that are determining the priorities of a movement based on the individual experiences of like 10 activists, 5 activists, 5 organizers, right? That did have experiences with discrimination, but maybe they happen inside a university. Maybe they happen inside of a boardroom. Maybe they happen inside of these spaces that have some kind of decision making or agenda making power. And they're not the main issue is that there's so many other people who are not in the room. Like the people in Flint are not usually in the room when we are talking about what the priorities for a movement should be, right? So like, should we create more should we focus a lot of our energy on what should we do that, right? So I think that the discipline practice of collective decision making, organizing, is there to ensure that the priorities of the elite of a community don't get the priorities of the movement don't get captured, right, by the elite.
I get you. So shifting that priority, shifting that focus, not to what 2 or 3 people have to say, but what are the, just the work that we do. If we have a construction committee, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, we're not looking at one person who has a wage theft case, we're looking at all people experiencing wage theft. And we're probably going to find out it comes through a lot more people than just like construction workers. We're going to find it comes through many, many, many more industries. So we're not looking at an issue with construction. We're looking at an issue with the job force as a whole. I'm kind of taking it away, but what I'm getting at is we need to reach a little bit deeper, and deeper is probably wider as far as more people.
Yes, I mean, so that phrase that like every organization uses, that like I'm like, what does it even mean anymore, right? Like to say like, we believe those directly affected should be the ones that lead the fight for change, right? Or whatever version of that. There's many versions, but like the focus on directly affected folks leading. That doesn't mean one person from the community leads. And also, it means that we are looking at an intersection, right? So one different axes need to come together. And it's like, okay, how does race, gender, age, ability intersect with class, right? So like we need to look at that, and we need to look in the big numbers, in the collective, right? Because a single member or representative of that community cannot do that. Just like I cannot tell you about the immigrant experience. I shouldn't be the one telling you what the immigrant rights movement should prioritize. Because my experience as an immigrant, I had discrimination, but like I just didn't have to struggle in some of the specific ways in which another members of my community had to.
Let's sit on that for a second. What song do you want to play here? We're just gonna throw this one on. South Gotta Change Everybody by Adia Victoria. Yeah.
But any questions? What do you think so far?
You want to close it out soon? This is good. I like it. I can hear it. Huh?
You're tired of walking with the children lead the way. 'Cause I'll feel I won't leave you, won't let you slip away. Come on with me, from the right way.
Everybody's in charge.
Yeah, that should be the basics. Alright.
You told a lie for so long, you're a stranger to yourself. You're all dressed up and make believe to be somebody else.
And then
Inclusive,
one more time for the show.
the truth would set you free.
Oh, it's the same.
Shout to the mountain, say my name. And if you're tired of walking with the children, lead the way. 'Cause 'cause I love you, I won't leave you, won't let you slip away. Come what may, we're gonna find a way, 'cause I've gotta change, 'cause I've gotta change. And ain't no clean way to make a man square the other's pain. At least the falling power lets him hide from what he's ashamed. But your walls are falling down, so you
I feel
gotta
like we're gonna have to go back in on this.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a tough, it's a complex topic. We're starting.
Yeah.
We'll keep going.
And if you're
I think this
tired
would
of
be fun as a
walking,
kid.
let the chair
Oh, yeah.
We turn this into an exercise.
We're
Cause
not
I
planning.
love you, I won't leave you, won't let you slip away. Come on, me,
Anyone
we're
who
gonna find a way. So love to the mountain, say my name. And if you're tired of walking, let the children lead the way. 'Cause I love you, I won't leave you.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Was that intense? How do your ears feel? They hurt me. Did they hurt you? Sorry, I don't know if y'all heard that, but we had a little bit of technical difficulties because, shoot, soundboard is hard.
Stuff happens.
Stuff happens. Whew.
So,
You're
you know,
just talking about indifference. Politics? What's the word?
deference politics.
Deference?
That's
Deference
the
politics?
word. That's the
Okay.
word. I mean, it's just like, you know, how in another way, like how individualism shows up in a
Mhm.
strategy room,
How does individualism show up in a strategy room?
or in a
Like putting all this pressure on one person to represent thousands of people. To
or
rep-
just the interest of one people.
Yeah. What do you see as best for the many?
Exactly. Without actually having a very rigorous.
Like, were there surveys? Was there a questionnaire? Was there somebody on the ground going door to door asking these people, how do you feel about these issues? Or was it just that one person's interpretation?
Exactly. And so there's an actual concept to that. It's called like elite capture. So
Mhm.
that's an actual book by Olufemi Taiwo, which I'm probably mispronouncing the name, but he's a philosopher. I think he's in Washington D.C., Georgetown University, perhaps.
Right.
And so he talks about how sometimes the elite and the elite people doesn't necessarily mean that you are actually elite, the 1%, but like the elite of a community.
Yeah.
The person who actually makes it in the boardroom, the person who actually makes it in a strategy room,
Mhm.
in a classroom, they are the elite of their community, and therefore, like, they are gonna be representing elite issues, right? So
Mhm.
if they are the ones solely without collective organizing, decision making, and outreach. If they're the ones that decide the priorities of the movement, what's end up gonna happen is that our movements are gonna prioritize their needs and not the needs of the people who really need it and the people who are not in the rooms. And one takeaway that I can leave everybody with, because then we can talk about like your takeaway. I would love to know.
Mhm.
The issue is the rooms, right? So when we're thinking about like how to prioritize the needs of our movement, let's think about the people who are not in our rooms and how do we get them to it?
Yeah.
How do we tear down the rooms if it's needed?
Mhm.
How do we bring them inside something different? How do we build something else where actual this collective decision making can take center place?
Yeah.
And I do love what Bobby was mentioning, that the beauty of workers' dignity, a dignidad obrera, is when a boss comes into the room and like it's all mine. It's like, who's in charge? And it's like, all of us. We're all in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And it trips them out, right? So how do we create more spaces like that, in which one person is not the one that gets to decide the priorities for everything, or or make like very big picture conclusions from an individual experience. And so we're gonna definitely expand a lot more on that though. But if you wanna, like, if you're a little curious, you can look for elite capture or deference politics, right? Which means listening to the most directly affected is not just to listen to the most seemingly oppressed person in the room, right? But actually going out there and talking to people, to many, many people.
Yeah. Wow.
Or listening to many, many people.
It kind of is like, I don't know, if you go ask one person, what does Nashville need more of, and you give them two options, more cars or better public transit, you know, they could very easily misrepresent so many people as far as what needs could look like or what could be most helpful.
I mean, it's the problem with representative democracy, but we don't have time to talk about that one.
No. I was just relating. I was trying to understand it because I feel like I learned a lot from you today. So thank you.
What is your takeaway?
My takeaway is addressing the self-help loop. And not leaning so heavily on, you know, I don't know. I tell people all the time, anybody who's wondering about organizing their workplace, anybody who is curious about like challenging their family and relatives, anybody who is like really looking to shift the dynamic of any group of people they're involved in, it always comes down to it's not going to be convenient. So if you're looking for the best mood, or the best, I don't know, the best whatever you need to be feeling, you're not going to have that all the time. So maybe today you feel great and you think you're going to feel that way tomorrow and you'll show up again. What if you don't feel that way tomorrow? Will you still show up? At some point it'll be necessary for you to show up. So if you're able to push past some of this, and I'm not trying to wear everybody out. I sound very insensitive to some degree, but also that individual in you seems a little insensitive to a bigger mass of people. So I'm just trying to rally y'all up and say we can be tied together in the same room and get stuff done. That would be great, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. We can get some stuff done. We can get water. We can get healthcare. We can get shelter.
Yeah. And I think we should work on like a vision, or I'll work on it. If not us, if not we, Cecilia.
Training by Fernie coming soon.
We're gonna do a training. We're gonna get you a visual. And let me just like, for transparency's sake, this was inspired off of some graph by the Charlie Fund. The Charlie Fund does a bunch of mindfulness things. I really like the things that they share. But this was all about having an idea of your presence when you show up into a room. And I just kind of adapted it to, you know, where people stand when it comes to their organizing work. Because I'm not gonna lie, I get so sick and tired of people coming up to me and talking about Marxism or whatever, and they like don't want to go like actually talk to people.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
If you're gonna read Marxism, you also be better to get your shoes dirty.
Yeah, Marx pretty much said, "Do as I say, not as I do." Right? Anyways, I gotcha.
You know who we're talking about.
Yeah, you know exactly who we're talking about. All right, y'all show up this Saturday. What's happening again this Saturday?
Saturday, training, what are your rights as a protester, 2 p.m. We are going to be putting the link to register in these comments. If somebody has it more handy, please put it in the comments. If you want to learn your rights as a protester, come this Saturday.
Absolutely. If you want to learn your rights, come on out. I'll be there. Cecilia will be there. Yeah?
Yeah,
maybe. Nah, we'll be there. Anyways. We hope y'all have a great rest of your week. Also, if you are dealing with wage theft, discrimination, if you are injured or hurt on the job and your bosses are not taking responsibility for what has happened, please show up on Thursday nights at Workers' Dignity at 7 o'clock. And yeah, we'll help you fight these cases and we'll help you, to the best of our ability, come up with a plan of action. I really wish we had a segment called Next Steps. Maybe we should do that next week.
Yeah.
Next steps are.
Next steps.
Next steps to show up this Saturday.
We're gonna do that.
Yeah, there we
It's
go.
gonna happen.
All right, y'all.
Power to y'all.
Bye bye.